Disclaimer. This is the Quibbcast.
It is about four nerds who don't want to live in the real world.
So we decided to make one of our own.
Literally, make one of our own.
It's the Quibbcast. It's the Quibbler podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the first ever Quibblers podcast, which we've called the Quibbcast.
We are the Quibblers, and we are four friends who all like nerdy stuff and all just so happen to be doing a theatre degree.
It began with a performance called I Thought You Ought to Know. As a theatre group, we decided that we wanted to continue making theatre after that performance at university. However, we realised that after we all graduated, it was going to be really kind of difficult to make a new performance or develop our first one. So we decided to make a podcast to keep ourselves relevant and to keep ourselves updated.
So maybe we should start off by actually introducing ourselves.
Yeah, I'm Jack. I deal with the Quibblers with the superhero genre and comic book genres. So I deal with all the kind of nitty-gritty kind of MCU, DCEU kind of movie slates that are going on that are quite popular right now with mainstream culture. I also have, in terms of in-depth knowledge over like comic books and kind of to the point of gratuitous type of knowledge. But yeah, that's what I cover in terms of basis.
Mm-hmm. And you do.
What do I do?
Yeah, so what did you do during the Quibblers performance?
Mostly forgot my lines. So I basically dealt with turning up on the day and doing what I needed to do.
Not on time, though.
Not on time, though. No.
I think you were very instrumental in the kind of ideas.
And you remembered what we did each rehearsal as well. That was really helpful because sometimes I would just forget what we did last rehearsal.
Yeah, you kind of you pumped out ideas that were kind of raw form ideas that we could then go, actually, yes, that could work into something.
That is what I did, yes. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm Sarah, and I am most interested in science fiction, especially Doctor Who. It is my favourite thing to watch. The old ones especially, I think they're fantastic. I really enjoy science fiction just for the fact that it's kind of real. It says it's fiction, but actually it's happening now. You know, we've got the Mars rover. We could live on Mars in the next 10 years, who knows? So that's pretty cool. In terms of what I actually did during the performance, I was very hands-on with making the props. Oh, it took forever. We decided that for this performance we wanted a really homemade aesthetic. So we decided that we would make the large majority of our props out of cardboard, tin foil and a hot glue gun, which I think was really instrumental to finding the frame for our piece.
Okay. I'm Ellis, and the thing that I most enjoy is fantasy and adventure. One of my favourite things is The Lord of the Rings. I really like dinosaurs. And the thing that I did while making I Thought You Ought to Know was I was essentially like the note taker, the script writer, I guess, and yeah, I was kind of the one that helped document what we actually did. So if we did end up forgetting or Jack didn't remind us what we did in each rehearsal, I could whack out a load of notes and just go through those.
Just off of that as well, I think you were very, very important for keeping us all in check.
Oh, for sure.
Reminding us that we were actually meant to meet up.
Yeah. Keeping some more than most in check, i.e. me.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
So my name's Grace. I came into the performance process quite late, and while I wasn't involved in the actual performance of the performance itself, I was a fair help behind the scenes, I'd say. So towards the end of it, I helped work as an outside eye and sort of help the guys see what was missing and what needed work. And then I was also helped out with the tech as well. So I actually did the tech on the day, which was fun, and I worked with Sarah quite closely to sort of design some of the lighting states and things like that, which was quite cool. I also, again, helped Sarah with some of the prop making, which was really cool to see some of that in the actual show. But as a whole, my main interest in sort of nerdy things, I would say, is video games. I think it covers a wide variety of all of the nerdy things that I'm interested in, which is cool.
Okay, so this is the first episode, and this is basically just going to be us answering and asking and answering questions. Kind of
Trying not to be awkward while doing it.
Yeah,
I think it's the main thing.
Absolutely. No, just so you guys, the listeners,
Oh yeah, the one person.
the one person who's listening to this,
It's just going to be me.
Including my mum.
Just going to be all of our mums.
No, yeah, just so you guys can actually get a chance to know us and know the basics of the performance that we made before we continue with other performances that we might make. So yeah, over to Grace with the questions then, I guess.
Yeah. So, sort of the first thing I wanted to ask you guys is, what even is a geek?
I came prepared for this one. I've got the dictionary definition and I want to see how much we agree or disagree with this. So,
Okay.
an unfashionable or socially inept person, or the verb, is engage in or discuss computer-related tasks obsessively with great attention to detail, to technical detail.
Well, I think unfashionable is a bit harsh.
Hey,
I
great.
I personally think that I am at the top of fashion.
Just for everyone, she is currently wearing a Gryffindor jumper.
Don't forget the
Quidditch jumper.
I was gonna say-
Jurassic Park necklace as well. With
And
with
also the
mosquito.
dinosaur socks.
So she
Yeah.
came prepared.
I mean, I'd say yes, we might not be the most trendy of people, but
We
I
try.
think I don't think wrong. I don't think it's an. Well, I mean, it's becoming more fashionable, so that's another topic for another day. But I think that it is quite antisocial.
I feel like it's antisocial until you go to events like Comic-Con and stuff like that. Because when you're kind of alone and being a geek, because obviously you're alone and being a geek, but when you go to places like Comic-Con or like a manga event or something like that, you're kind of surrounded by all these people that love the same things you do. Even if it's not exactly the same thing, even if it's, I prefer the anime over the manga, I prefer the manga over the anime, you're still...
There's a common ground.
Yeah, there's a common ground there where you still really enjoy the same story, or you still really enjoy the artwork. So,
I don't like the way the verb is description. Its description is like technical. I think it's in depth. I think that's quite an old definition of a geek. I think the
But it
assumption.
says obsessive.
I think that's right. I think obsessive is right, but I don't think the word they use about describe it technical. I don't think that's right. I think that's a kind of
20 years ago.
that is somewhere the computers came out. Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So I think that's again. I think the way geek is described or is perceived is a very outdated thing right now. I think it's updated heavily since.
We've definitely made the point of you could be a geek about anything.
Yeah.
You know, you could be a geek about a sock collection. You
how
can
to
be-
assemble a
trains.
sofa, you know?
Yeah, you know,
Stamps.
IKEA furniture. If that's your thing, you go for it, girl.
Whatever
You're a
tickles your
nerd,
pickle.
You're a geek in furniture.
Yeah.
That's what you are.
You can know the ins and
Yeah.
out of an entire musical and Disney film, and people
You
can
can
hate
be
you
a
for
Disney geek. That is
People
absolutely
can love you for
fine.
it.
So I think, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's a very outdated term to say that it's a technical thing. I mean, I'd say that we're quite traditionalist nerds. I think we've got quite traditionally geeky interests.
Yeah.
But I
Sort
think
of.
there are other things where I know about screws.
Yeah.
I have to know about screws, and you could say that I'm a geek for screws.
I know a lot about coffee
There you go.
because of my job.
Alcohol.
Exactly. I don't just know about screws just for fun. I do have to do that for my job. But, you know,
Yeah.
I would consider myself a bit of a nerd about screws.
It's interesting the terms that you guys have been using throughout this. Obviously, the question was sort of what is a geek, but obviously the term sort of nerd came up as well, which I think leads me on quite nicely to my next question. there's obviously the other idea of a sort of a dork as well, geek and nerd and dork. What would you say is the difference between these three terms?
I always pictured them all separated, but also kind of the same. So I always pictured geek as kind of like, a geek is obsessive about stories and things that they can get from stories and stuff like that. Nerd, I always picture as academical kind of area. And then I'm not too sure about dork, but that's how I've always viewed.
Dorks for me sound like a kind of a bit of a slur.
I'm like a bit of a dweeb.
Yeah, it
Sort of
makes me
that sort of-
think of someone who doesn't dress very... Like, actually, that makes me think of more of the definition that we heard earlier.
Yeah.
It makes me think of someone who's kind of wearing trousers up to their armpits, a horrible, like...
The thick
like,
black rimmed glasses with
like
the tape.
And, but no, not necessarily that. It's just things like he'd have a runny nose or something like... One of them things where you just feel like a bit...
Yeah, but like really
It's that
big
sort of like
teeth.
stereotype and things like that that's in a lot of sketches and things.
Yeah,
But
that's
then,
stigma.
on the other hand, you can just be a bit dorky. You can be a bit like... I don't know. It's a bit of a weird one, dork, I think.
Yeah.
It doesn't really sit in any of it, but it
No.
sort of also fits quite nicely with the other definitions.
I keep thinking like geek is like someone who is geeky or has something they have a real passion and interest in, but they're quite introvert. They keep that to themselves. While a nerd is quite open and they kind of is quite honest about their kind of, this is what I'm into, this is why I love it. While someone who's geeky kind of keeps it to themselves. I don't know. That's always kind of the way
Well,
I've
it's like
seen it.
geeky is sort of secretive.
Yeah,
and
it's
nerdy
my
is sort of
business.
like-
It's my passion. Yeah.
Nerdy's the sort of idea that people have where it's always like, well, actually, I can know more
Yeah.
about this thing.
Nerdy
Yeah.
makes me think of the black glasses without tape.
Right.
But like the fake black glasses that don't actually have lenses and like gamer girls and things like that.
Yeah.
Nerd to me sits a bit higher than geek in a social pecking.
Yeah.
But they're definitely all at like the bottom rung.
I mean, definitely, but there's a part of nerds that gets commercialised a little bit. It's like, oh, I'm so nerdy.
I think dork's an interesting one because I feel like dork, when you were talking about academic kind of a geekdom or nerdom, I think dork is kind of the academic one.
Like a Poindexter.
Yeah, you know your
What
stuff
a-
about, I don't know, maths, English, history. That's dork because
Computers.
because that has a relevance to a wider, like, how society runs in a way. Because I remember my mum does it when she's driving a car, and if it's a bad driver, she calls them a dork, which is a really weird thing.
Wholesome as anything.
Isn't that weird? Like, oh, what's a dork? And it's like, but no, that's a bad driver. But she says, no, that's a dork, and I don't get it. Like, I don't know if that's maybe dork meant something a long time ago.
See, this is what I think. I think dork, instantly, you just start to think of a bit of a more derogatory way of talking about neeks. Geeks and nerds.
We've combined them.
But I also feel like
Combined it,
it's,
Yeah.
but I also feel
Combined
like
it.
it's like a lost phrase.
Yeah.
Because people from our generation, any generation younger than us, don't really use the word dork. It's not really.
I think of 90s when you say it.
It's not really what. Yeah, it's not really what we say.
Yeah.
No.
We either say, "Oh, I'm a nerd," or "Oh, I'm a geek."
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't really say, "Oh, I'm a dork." You don't.
No.
I think the only time I've actually heard anyone say, "I'm a dork" is on Sydney White film. That's the only time. If you've ever watched Sydney White, it's not a very nerdy or geeky film. I've just watched it. And like the. I was going to say spoiler, but then I decided not to. So
I get.
I feel like that's something we should
Disclaimer,
warn.
spoilers.
This is definitely not going to be a spoiler-free
Oh god, no!
podcast
Don't
at all.
listen to this if you haven't seen things.
I
You
think-
need to make sure you've watched every piece of media, read
Pop
every
culture
comic,
wise.
played every game, because
Because guaranteed,
you will ruin it.
Jack will ruin it.
I will. That's
You,
a promise
you need
and a
to read
guarantee.
every book because Ellis has read every book. It's just where it
I
is.
think.
Anyway, sorry.
Sorry, so just to go off dork, I think in terms of today's society, when we're talking about how like geekdom, wearing geek legit as a brand, I think dork as a word is not marketable, like nerd or geek, and that's why we
It's
don't hear
just
it as much.
it's lost
Yeah,
impact.
it doesn't mean anything anymore.
It just kind of
It doesn't hurt us.
It doesn't hurt us.
It doesn't
at all.
hurt us anymore.
I feel like my gamer tag just took a really hard ego.
Oh, sorry.
Follow my Insta. No.
Hey.
But so you said something that was quite interesting earlier on about sort of geekdom being mainstream, and I think that sort of geeky or nerdy things, just to use a sort of colloquial term for it, has become a lot more mainstream and a lot more popular. How do you guys feel about that? Because obviously it used to be a really niche thing to be interested in comic books, whereas now sort of superheroes and things like that are huge.
I think it's a load of bollocks, to be fair.
Going in there strong.
That was okay.
I actually have quite a few strong opinions on this, mainly because it's like it's not popular to be a nerd or a geek. It's not. It just isn't. It's popular to enjoy Marvel, and it's popular to enjoy DC and stuff like that. But as soon as anyone starts to mention manga, Lord of the Rings, like it's popular to like Game of Thrones. But I have a friend who absolutely loved Game of Thrones, but adamantly refused to watch Lord of the Rings because it was too nerdy. And I'm like, but you enjoyed Game of Thrones.
But then it's also the idea of people who watch Game of Thrones are cool and they're caught up with media, but the people who've read the books are sort of a bit odd.
And it's like, I remember there was an event on at uni, and the theme was, so we would all, like, loads of people would pay for tickets and we'd all go to Hanley and there'd all be like a big night out, and then obviously you'd get the coach back, and the theme was Beauty and the Geek, essentially Beauty and the Beast. And I was like, I don't really know how I feel about that, because it's a bit like you're calling geeks beasts, and I don't know, I'm very actually really.
But then
quite
also the
conflicted
people
about
that
it.
went as geeks dressed exactly how we described that sort of stereotype earlier.
Glasses,
it was with the
white
glasses,
shirt,
and,
trousers up to your armpits.
the sort of like really short tie. I don't know what that is.
So I genuinely don't think it's not popular at all. It's just people want to be seen as a geek because it's popular. I'm making inverted commas with my fingers for those, because you can't see, because it's popular. But no, I don't think it's popular at all. As soon as you express the fact that you know a little more about a subject than you should, then you're automatically, oh no, that's not allowed.
You're allowed
that's
a
not popular.
surface level.
It's like you
knowledge.
can be a Disney fan, but the second I try and talk for longer than 2 minutes about the Hunchback of Notre Dame, it's not allowed.
Exactly.
But I mean, I'm a bit conflicted. I won't lie, because on the one hand, I completely agree with what you said, but on the other hand, merch. You know, merch. There's so much. It's fantastic. You know, you can get everything now. Just anything you could possibly want. Like pop figures now. You can get a pop figure for everything. You know, Star Wars being taken over by Disney. I can get everything I want. I can get a real BB-8 if I want.
Yeah, the real droid that goes around the room. And you can, it's so cool.
So things like that, and you know, things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to get before, you get a bit more access to now. Especially things like, you know, Forbidden Planet is becoming so much more popular, which before was the tiniest shop that had such a small, you know, it was great. Every single nerd, geek, dork, everyone who had an interest in these niche little things could go there and get what they wanted. But now there's just so much more, and it's great and it's fantastic. So actually, I don't know. Is it the commercialising of the nerd kind of works in my favour because things are much cheaper because there's more of it. But then does it become less special?
But on that again, I think the things that have become more available and the things that have become more popular are the same sort of things that Ellis was talking about. Whereas if there's other niche things that you're really interested in, they're not going to be any bigger because they're not marketable. It's like you were saying about the whole idea of being a geek or a nerd is marketable now. Yeah. So I feel like that's kind of where that confliction for you, I think, should lies, is the sort of commercialism and the popularity of things doesn't change the fact that there's still like sort of animes and mangas, yeah, that are still really sort of niche. That you have to go out of your way to find and things like that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also kind of difficult because obviously in anime, like if you walk up to someone and say, "What's the most famous anime?" They might say
Death Note or something.
Like Death Note, Naruto.
Yeah.
Full Metal Alchemist,
definitely the most popular.
Pokemon.
Pokemon, stuff like that.
Pokemon is an anime, yes.
But then, like, as soon as you say what's the best anime, people might go Kimetsu no Yaiba or
Spirited Away.
Spirited Away.
Yeah.
But then again, that's
Digimon.
commercialised.
Classic.
That's commercialised because
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
Anyone could
But
kind of. I'm not trying to be rude, but anyone could kind of go, oh yeah, Spirited Away. Yeah, I've heard
Yeah.
of that.
But it's not like
But they
Whereas if
haven't
you go
watched
to
it.
like, I don't know, you go to Food Wars and Yuri on Ice and
so ready for the next season.
yeah,
One Punch
you
Man.
go to things like that.
I like One Punch.
The one anime you've watched.
I've watched 3.
You know, you start to go into depth and suddenly you're not cool anymore because you've watched something that's
Yeah.
not
And then
the
suddenly,
3 most popular.
Yeah, and suddenly you're a weeb or you're an otaku or something like that.
We'll get
And
into
it's
that
just-
at some point.
I think as well with it, with the current state where you brought Marvel and DC, these are kind of IPs that have existed since the end or during the Second World War. So these are kind of, and it's not just that. It's also it's because those icons have existed and they've got prior audience that right now they're marketable because they kind of build off nostalgia. So you know who you're going to watch when you go and watch Spider-Man, because you're going to watch Peter Parker. Now, if you said about 10 years ago, well, not 10 years ago, but when Miles Morales first debuted around about 2010, 2011, and I said, oh, I can't wait to watch this Miles Morales film, without any context for anyone knowing who that is, they go, who the fuck's he? But now in 2019, they now know who Miles Morales is. So I say, oh, you know what, I really want to watch Miles Morales. They'll go, oh, Miles Morales from Spider-Verse. I love that character. Or, oh, Miles Morales from Spider-Man PS4. Great. I know that now because it's been put in a mass media publication that I can be like, ooh, I know that. I have knowledge of him. But say if you watched, I don't know, Stranger Things as well, that kind of builds on the nostalgia of the 80s, because even that's bizarrely become a genre right now.
Yeah.
Is kind of like, oh, I know what the reference when they make a truck fly over their heads. I know it, and they're riding a bike. I know it's a reference to E.T. I've watched that. I know that.
Yeah.
So there's kind of this kind of way where nothing is original can get a good audience because it's not building off anything. So like, trying to think of anything original.
There's a new show currently that we started watching.
Go on.
What's it called?
Raising Dion.
Raising Dion on Netflix. It's a superhero show.
It's been sort of advertised like years ago, and it's only just come to sort of
And
fruition.
it's about this kid that's got superpowers.
And he's like 7, 8.
Yeah.
It's really young.
It was a really cool concept.
Yeah.
But we didn't really care. We started watching it and it was cool, but it's not, I don't know, it's not one of them things where you go, wow, yeah, everyone's talking about this, oh my gosh, I've got to watch it. It just kind of falls flat because it hasn't got that prop.
That following.
To
that
boost
big-
it up.
Yeah. And I guarantee, probably in 6 or 7 months, when people start to realise what it is, and you know, it will probably take off because it is good. It's not boring. It's not, you know, silly.
It's just
But
got a different feel.
Yeah.
It's not.
It doesn't
got
have an
that
existing
boost
market.
yet.
It
Yeah.
actually also doesn't exist in a current universe. It's outside of Marvel and DC. And actually in the show, one of the things that they do is they talk about comics. And one of the interests that the kid has is this guy showing him these superheroes, and he loves it because he sees it as magic. And because I think they look at what we look at in our world and try and sort of bring that into their world, it sort of distances it, and it's a sort of really weird middle ground.
Yeah.
But also, just going off on a quick tangent, the internet is responsible, I think, for a lot of this. The way that geek culture and nerd culture has kind of boomed, almost. Because before the internet came along, you had your friends, you had your little friendship group. You'd go and you'd get your comics together, you'd play Dungeons and Dragons together, you'd stay within your little friendship group. You wouldn't really, you know, all the nerds would band together and you'd have that group of people. You might meet other nerds at a convention or something like that, but primarily you have that group of people now, and you can talk to anyone.
Now you just type in a hashtag on any social media site and you can see hundreds and thousands of things about it.
So I think it's got to a point where, of course, this niche, these people who, as the description of a geek says, are technical and they know about the internet, of course they're going to have risen up through the birth of the internet. It's kind of a nerd stomping ground. It's almost like our little second home. So I think that definitely has a big part to play in it.
So what do you guys think it actually takes to be a geek?
I think you just need to have an interest in something, really.
Mm.
Like Sarah said earlier, you can literally be a geek about anything you want to be a geek about.
Yeah.
If you want to be a geek about glasses, be a geek about glasses, become an optician, live your dream, you know what I mean? Like, or...
It's almost like there's a rule though, isn't there? I think, at least.
With being a geek.
Well, because when do you become a geek?
Mm.
When do you cross that line of liking something and becoming this obsessive
Human
thing?
being, yeah.
I
When,
think
when do you cross that line of I'm showing a slight interest in something to being immersed and fully invested in this one thing?
I think it's when you realise that you absolutely love that thing.
Yeah.
I think the problem is though is that can get easily policed. Like I think I shared the video with you guys, but there was a video online about, it was just a sort of sketch about these two guys who were judging who was allowed to be a nerd based on who they were and what they were interested in. And a woman turned around and said, I'm really interested in My Little Pony, I know this, that and the other. And she's like, is that nerdy enough? And they're like, unless you're like 45 years old and a man, no, you're not allowed to be a nerd about that. And I think it's not down to other people to sort of police what is and isn't nerdy. I think it's down to you to decide, yeah, I'm a little bit nerdy about that. And I think that shouldn't be seen as a negative. If you love something, you should be able to love it.
Yeah.
I just think that there is a policing that happens.
Yeah.
Definitely a policing. If you don't know enough about something, you're not a
Fake fan.
You're
Yeah.
a fake fan.
Well, there you go.
Fake
That
fan.
stigma gets attached.
Yeah.
I think knowing you're geeky is returning to whatever product or whatever kind of, whether it be a franchise, whether you know, you said spectacles. If you return to that interest, if something has kind of had an impact on you that much, for you to have to either do outside research, because you know, say like with board games or just like the Dark Souls series, that requires a good amount of knowledge for you to do outside of the game. That's how immersed you are within that world, and I think that's also a credit to the creators to give you such an impact, to draw you in, that you put more of an effort into like, well, I'm going to find out who this character is, or I'm going to find out what this world means. And the fact that your efforts to look up this information is rewarded because that information exists and it's out there for you to get, I think warrants your interest. And I think that's what makes you geeky, because you keep delving into it. You want to keep learning more.
Is it kind of one of them things where you go, I know this, I like this, but I want to find out the behind the scenes, what's underneath the main spectacle.
Yeah.
You know, you can watch a Marvel film and you can go, but why? Why did this happen? Who's this character?
Yeah.
You know, and you actually stop and go, I want to know more about this thing.
I think that's really a really interesting point, actually, because obviously, say the creator of Bloodborne, he is obviously a nerd about Bloodborne, whether or not he loves it. So I think that there's now that we've like just had that conversation, and realise that maybe you don't have to love the thing to be able to be a nerd in it. Because I don't know whether the creator loves Dark Souls and that kind of stuff. But like,
I could talk a lot
in
about
order-
what Miyazaki likes. It doesn't matter. But we'll
But
But the fact is he's got that wealth of knowledge.
yeah, she's got that wealth of knowledge.
As do
he
you.
is automatically.
But it's
a
like
nerd.
if you wrote a book, like J.K. Rowling, she's automatically a nerd because she knows every single part of Harry Potter. It's all in her head.
That's a good
Unless
point.
she changes it at the last minute.
Well, that's but that's the thing, and I think that's the difficulty with geekdom, is you want to kind of show off your knowledge. I think that's the point of geekdom, where it gets a bit toxic, it gets a bit like, well, that's how I'm a geek, because I know more than you. It's kind of this insecurity, if I don't have as much knowledge as you, or I don't have it more than you, then I'm kind of like impotent in my own favourite genre, in a way. But with likes of like J.K. Rowling, like you said, she does kind of either she adds or she detracts from what you think. So like when Dumbledore came out as gay, it's like, well, I didn't know that. Well, it's like, well, why would you? Because it's never explicitly said in the books.
Well, it's like that joke where there's like, oh, there's no Jewish representation in Harry Potter, and then it's like, well, she could easily tweet and say that one kid that was mentioned for 10 seconds in Snape's class in the first book.
Is now Jewish.
He's Jewish, so therefore there's Jewish representation. It's
Yeah.
but that's a whole other kettle
Yeah,
of fish. I think we need to be careful.
But that's when the fandom and the geekdom kind of go, no, it's not fair because I didn't know that, and if I didn't know that, I look wrong, and if I'm wrong, that means I've never been right. And it's kind of that issue where it's the desire to belong to a group, and if you then get told, no, you kind of got that little information wrong, you're not allowed in it. It's like when you told me that Hawkeye is deaf. I didn't know that. And I like to think.
And you're
I
the
know it.
superhero.
And I like to think I know everything about superheroes. I didn't know this. I didn't know this because I didn't know how good his like story arc is as a deaf person.
I think as interesting as your lack of knowledge is.
Yeah.
we should
I think
probably.
Let's move on, but like stuff like that.
So I think we're going to move on before Jack has some kind of heart failure. I don't know what's happening. But yeah, so as we are a theatre company, maybe it's time I think we should talk a bit about theatre.
Yes.
Probably a good idea, isn't it?
So, as Ellis stated earlier, we all did a theatre course together at university, and I think it's important that we discuss about us as theatre makers and what influences us. So, what influences you guys as theatre makers? Opening the question to the room.
For me, it's a lot of things. A lot of things that I've read, and a lot of things that I've seen, and just even if it's just something that I pass by, say if there's something on a billboard, and it has like a phrase on it, and that'll stick with me if I like that, and then I'll be like, oh, okay, that's an interesting thing. Maybe I could add that in somewhere or kind of change it and morph it. But no, yeah, I get my influence from a lot of places, and I actually feel quite a lot of the time is that I bounce off other people's ideas really, really well. It's like my original ideas normally aren't so great, and I will happily admit that. But as soon as I start to have a rapport with the people that I'm creating with, that's when I feel like I can access my what do you call it?
Creativity.
That's the one. Creativity. But no, yeah, that's when I feel like I can actually access my creativity is once that I've kind of had a conversation with the people that I'm creating with, because I don't always like to assume that my idea is the best idea, and I don't like to assume that everybody will like my idea. So I always prefer to bounce off other people's ideas just so I know that, okay, people agree with this. If I can help make it a little bit better, then I will.
See, I feel like I'm the complete opposite of you. I get my inspiration from the people around me and their ideas. I think I find my inspiration from turning the raw ideas that you would come up with and going, that's fantastic, and pairing it with something that Jack might have said earlier, and going, these two things work so well together. I suppose I'm quite unoriginal, really. I'm very quiet until I hear those things. I love the idea of happy accidents, where someone will be, I don't know, humming a tune, and you might say a quote from, Lord of the Rings, and in my head they mash together perfectly, and it creates a song.
Well, that's how we came up with the main song.
Yeah, the song. the infamous song. But yeah, I think my inspiration comes from the people around me, definitely, rather than the things that are around me.
Yeah. I like, in terms of making theatre, I love the idea you enter a theatre space and you just play around in any shape or form. It can start with a discussion, or it can just start with you getting up and just doing, whatever you feel like you want to do in that space. So like we originally had a dance sequence. Yeah, so we originally had that dance sequence, and while it was cut, it was something engaging for us to make. And I feel like, again, whether or not it goes in the piece, whether it gets cut or whatever, if that energy continues throughout that process, it's still helping you make work. Like we did, I think, was it 2 hours of us doing a lightsaber fight or trying to recreate it from A New Hope between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader, right? And that was just funny because one, I was hungover, and two, it was just the constant trying to get it right precisely to how they did it with movements and angles and even text.
With terrible pound shop lightsabers.
Yeah. But it's the fun of making it. I feel like if at least for me, if you're miserable making the work, then your work is probably going to turn out miserable. I'm not saying if you don't put effort in and it isn't like, you know, some tasks can be grueling in creating theatre because you want to get it perfectly right. But I think if there is no interest, you know, I think
That was our process.
having fun.
Our whole thing was, are we having fun?
Yeah.
Because if we're not having fun doing it, we're not putting it in.
Yeah.
I think that's what drew me a lot to your performance. Again, sort of being on the outside of it, I saw some of how you guys created it, but for me, the performance itself was just so much fun. And it wasn't just because I'm interested in nerdy things, it was because you guys were loving it, and that meant that I was loving it.
Every time we performed it, even if we were rehearsing a specific bit over and over and over again, normally, you know, you do a show and you think, oh God, not this bit again. But during that entire performance, there was never a part where I went,
It never got like stale.
Literally,
No.
any
was just
single time
fun.
that we did the beginning sequence of the whole take on me shoulder with I genuinely, because for those who haven't seen it, we were facing the back to begin with, and then obviously we turned around, but I would just smile as soon as it began. I would be smiling and I would be having fun because it was genuinely just fun.
It was as soon as the lights in the space went out and that walk-in music for our audience came in, I was instantly just filled with joy.
Yeah.
And I think that is a key part for all three of us as an inspiration for making the work we make is joy.
Yeah, and it was obviously really, really nice to realise that our audience enjoyed it as well, because obviously that was the when
we thought we were gonna just
we the first time that we performed it in front of people was the actual assessment day.
Yeah.
And even though Grace had often told us how funny it was, we didn't realise how funny it was.
Yeah, we'd had feedback from a couple of people, haven't we?
Yeah.
Saying, oh, it's really good,
Oh yeah,
it's
it's
quite
really
funny,
good.
it's good. And
But we were a bit.
we kind of went, oh, is it? It's
Yeah.
You were only
kind of
a lot of
Is
things
it
you were
just fun
saying.
for us?
Are we
You-
entertaining ourselves?
A lot of the stuff that you were saying was that you were worried that it was only funny because these people knew you and they knew the things you were talking about.
Yeah.
But then the second you got that wide audience in, there were loads of people in there that hadn't seen half of the things you were referencing. But for them, a lot of it was about, oh, Jack looks really, really stupid, but he also looks really, really happy. I don't know why I picked on you there. It's just your face. But I think
It is
as
true.
well-
I look rather stupid.
But I think as well, it's like, oh my God, you know, there's this really cool moment where this is happening, and Sarah's opening up her heart about how she really feels about science fiction, but also they're having a lightsaber fight. What's going on back there? Like, it was that, and when people had things that they knew, and picking that out was really fun for them. And I think for me, that again is what drew me to you guys.
It was the fun and the nostalgia. I think for us was the inspiration of this particular performance. We might do one that's really sad and anger-filled. Who knows?
We've got
Stay
loads
tuned.
of ideas. On that though, for those who haven't seen the performance, keep an eye on our YouTube channel.
It's linked in the description.
It is linked in the description. Anyway, so we'll
Also, what you're watching this on, more than likely.
yeah, 100%. Anyway, so tell me more. What kind of shows do you guys watch in terms of theatre?
I'm a musical theatre nerd. Alright, we did a contemporary theatre degree, and that's frowned upon, and people who know me from that, just close your ears for a minute because I'm going to bang on about musical theatre. It's my jam, okay? I like it when a group of people all gather round and dance a dance that they all magically know and sing a song that they all magically know.
And
the
somehow
words
they
to.
know how to harmonise at that exact point.
Yeah. You know, stick me in a village in, you know, somewhere in Africa.
I was going to say it's definitely,
Uganda.
it's definitely going to turn
That's
into
it.
a Book of
You
Mormon
know,
reference.
put me in Book of Mormon. It's amazing. I cried when I saw Book of Mormon because it was just fantastic.
You cried the second the first ding dong happened
Yep,
in the
I
opening
did.
song.
I cried at the first note. I cried when I walked in. I cried when I saw the set. It's just something. It's my escape. I just enjoy it. It's so pure and full of joy. So you know what? Yeah, I could have come up with some really deep answer about what contemporary theatre I enjoy and that, but you know what? On the theme of I make things from my own joy, that's what I like.
I think for me it depends on how I feel, really.
Well, like, on the day.
Yeah, because there's some performances that I've been to, and I've absolutely hated it, and then I've gone home, and the next day I've been thinking about it, and I've been like, holy crap, that is actually really, really good, really, really intelligent. Even though I absolutely hated the hell out of it.
I feel like I know what you're referencing.
But it's like, no, yeah. But I also, like Sarah, I really enjoy musical theatre. Favourite has got to be Phantom of the Opera. I cried pretty much through the entirety of that. But no, yeah. But like I said, it depends on how I feel. If I feel like I want to be very mentally challenged. But
Well,
challenged mentally as a performance to make me think about stuff, then I would happily do that. Especially when I was at uni, there was quite a lot of those, and obviously I was in the frame of mind where I was like, okay, I need to think critically about this. So having the performance make me think about other things, then it was, yeah, I really enjoyed those. So performances that make me think.
Yeah, I feel like I'm the same as you actually.
Yeah.
You guys like musical theatre because you can sing, so we'll move on. Let's move on to those of us who are tone deaf, shall we?
And that's when I step in. I'm greedy. I like any form of theatre. Well, I'm greedy. I like traditional. I like my contemporary. Screw off if you don't like that. No. No.
Is your mother with that?
No, so I do like theatre, and I like, obviously, but like I like minimalism as well. Like there was a piece called Heads Up, and that was really good, where it was just a man on a sound desk describing this narrative of 5 different characters as if he was playing Sims, and it was really engaging and it was really entertaining. But all that was on him was a spotlight. So it can be something like that. It can be like Lemons, where I'm more interested with the character arcs and I'm more interested in what's going on, as the character's not really the performance in itself, although the performance is great. But yeah, so like I just like all types of theatre, if that's alright.
You just like to be entertained.
I just like to be entertained, whether engaged, whatever, I like it.
Same. I know, I'm kind of, I like all of the things that you guys have talked about, but then I decide afterwards if I actually liked it or not. A big thing for me as well is that I really like genderqueer theatre, but that's a whole topic for another time. Things like drag and stuff like that, I'm on it. Anything that questions sort of anything in the queer community, I'm all for. But then again, I also love musical theatre, which I suppose you could argue is queer theatre as well. But we'll get onto that. I think I'm very much a case of I will go and watch anything, and then I'll decide if I like it or not. But yeah. Okay, so one more question for you guys before we wrap this up. Has there been a moment where you've just thought, yeah, this is it. This is my moment. This is what I want to do?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Would you like to elaborate, any of you?
No.
Okay.
No, go on, Jack.
Yeah.
You go first.
For me, it's just to be, a performer in general. I watched a film called The Truman Show, which I am quite... No!
Oh my god, Truman Show is
they've heard this before.
Do a shot every time he says it.
I know.
Truman Show. So, spoiler alert, I'm going to spoil the film, but there's a scene where the main character, Truman, is at the edge of his world, this little dome he's in, and he crashes his ship into it, which is a wall that looks like the sky. And then after hitting it a few times and getting upset, he decides to walk along it, and there's a cool image where he looks like he's walking on water, and then there's steps, but the way the camera's filmed, it doesn't look like he's going up steps, it looks like he's just kind of stepping into the sky. And as a kid watching it, I didn't really get the biblical, probably oh my gosh, it's like he's something biblical.
He's like something biblical. Amazing.
That's like Jesus, y'all.
It's the tagline of our next show.
That's like something biblical.
That's like something biblical.
That's the title of this episode.
But so I remember thinking I want to do something like that because I know that has an impact on me. I don't know why it's having an impact on me, but I know it means something bigger than what a 3-year-old mind knows at that point. So I was like, that's for me was an impact where I was like, I really want to perform, and I really want to act, and I really just want to make art and make work.
You say you watched it at 3?
I watched it free. I know
weird
it was on.
film
It was. I was watched it on
2.
free because it was on VHS that my sisters have, and I used to pop it on. I was like,
I mean,
ooh.
I'm
Right,
gonna. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, we'll move on.
Drop a bomb, but I've actually never seen the Truman Show.
Same.
Well, I
But
know what
the
we're doing
problem
after
is
this.
I know what happens.
There's a divisive one.
Because here's the thing, he doesn't shut up about it, so I now know what
Yeah, I know,
happens.
there's no
Yeah,
point in you
there's
watching
no point
it.
in watching
Yeah.
Yeah, no point watching it.
Anyway, yeah, sorry, but Sarah's never seen the Goonies, so
Right.
throwing her under the bus. Go on, Ellis.
So mine was literally just a very specific moment in time. It was actually after I went to uni, because when I was applying for uni, I was indecisive of whether I wanted to do a history degree or a drama degree or a theatre degree. But no, it was when I went to see Phantom of the Opera live with my 2 sisters, and literally as soon as the kind of overture started and chills. I'm not even joking. I cried because it's been my favourite musical for years, and actually seeing it in the flesh and actually having those emotions, even though I knew exactly what was happening, I was still shocked. I would still cry and I would still laugh, and it was just in that moment in time I was like, this is where I belong. This is what I want to do. Not necessarily obviously doing a musical theatre show, but I want to be able to influence people's emotions like those people on the stage influenced mine. And that was essentially where my kind of love and need for theatre, to make theatre, came from.
Yours is so similar to mine as well. So mine was, I'd already done a performing arts degree? Oh goodness, I got 2. I'd already done a performing arts course at college. And it wasn't until I went to see the National Theatre version of Frankenstein that I walked out and I just cried. I sobbed. And I turned around to Grace and I said, that's what I want to do. Because I was taken on such a journey. And for a performer, you know, very famous Benedict Cumberbatch was playing the creature, Frankenstein's monster. But for 5 minutes, all he did was move and learn to walk on that stage. And for 5 minutes, I sat there and didn't breathe. It was just so captivating. And to be able to take someone and almost steal their focus and their mind and take them to a place that's so different from their own, it moved me in ways that I can't even describe. And when I came out, I think I actually was crying because I didn't want to go back into the real world. I was happy in my little cocoon of Frankenstein and his monster. But that's when I realised that's what I want to be able to do, to be able to move people and inspire people with what I do.
Well, mine's going to sound absolutely ridiculous after that heartfelt display. I've always been an attention seeker, and I'll open myself up to that, it's true. But I think for me, the moment when I realised that I didn't, it's not that I wanted to perform, that I needed to be a performer, was when I actually got a chance to go up on a stage and I got an actual audience reaction from something I did. And it was like the most minor thing. I was like an understudy for someone in a show and they were off sick, so I obviously got the chance to do it. And I said my first line and there was the tiniest chuckle in the audience because it was like a really rubbish pun. And the second I heard that chuckle, I was like, I need to work out how I can be better and make more people feel better. And for me, I think it's all about enjoying myself and making sure that people are enjoying what I'm doing. So, nowhere near as in-depth and heartfelt as everyone else, but, you know, look at me, I'm on stage. So,
Still just as valid.
yeah.
So, I think that's pretty much it. That's who we are in a bit of a nutshell, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, essentially.
So in the future, we want to keep these podcasts going. We've got a few things that we know we want to talk about. You know, got a couple of questions, a couple of debates, a couple of topics that we know we want to do. We hope that you join us on the way. Hopefully it won't be too nerdy, it won't be too theatre, it'll be a nice mix of the two.
Perfectly balanced, like everything should be.
And just like that. So we're hoping to keep these at about 45 minutes. I know this one's a bit longer, but hopefully we'll learn how to stop talking.
One day.
Yeah, one day we'll learn how to stop babbling
Jack from
on.
talking.
So I think the one thing that we should answer right at the end of this, before we start jabbering away at you to subscribe, is why are we called the Quibblers?
Yeah.
Why are we? Why are we the Quibblers?
Well, we came up with a lot of names. Didn't we?
Yeah, we did,
No,
yeah.
I
Gazan.
had Gazan. No, yeah, it was. To be fair, I don't even think we chose it. I think our lecturer chose it
Yeah.
for
He
us.
told us to look up what a group of geeks.
Group of geeks actually is,
And it was like the 5th down on the list that I found.
yeah, and it was a collective group of geeks or nerds is a quibble.
And then we instantly went, oh, Harry Potter!
Like the nerds you are.
Exactly. So it just kind of, yeah,
It fit,
It
didn't
worked.
It
yeah.
Really
felt
well.
so right, especially with the name of our first performance being a complete rip of Harry Potter, with no
Yeah.
Harry Potter content in it
Yeah.
whatsoever.
Apart from the title.
I was gonna say,
And there was a wand there
There was a
somewhere.
I was gonna
There's
say,
one.
I
There was the
shook
bare
around.
minimum of Harry Potter.
Yeah.
So it's a bit weird actually for us to be called the Quibblers, because we're not very Harry Potter related.
But I think because we quibbled over like arguments.
we did.
Over, like,
No, we did.
we
There is a lot
yeah.
that just felt right
Yeah.
with being called the Quibblers.
Yeah.
But I know that it's probably not a question that's really at the forefront of everyone's minds, but I thought it was important because that's who we are. We're a
Yeah.
misfit,
We're a quibble of
ragtag
geeks.
bunch
Exactly.
of geeks who just happen to be
Who are
called quibble.
unfashionable.
Some of us.
But anyway, thank you for listening. We have been the Quibblers.
Please like, share, and subscribe.
But no, seriously, if you like us, if you're interested in what we do, check out all of the links in which will be in the description below, I'm sure. Check out all of our socials and just let us know if you liked it.
Yeah,
'cause
we
wanna
will be
make more.
posting that awful video of all of us dancing. Don't
Oh,
worry.
don't worry, that's
They've got to
going
teach
up.
me it yet as well, so we'll see how.
Oh boy, you're gonna love it.
You're welcome.
But yeah, feel free to leave a comment. Let us know what we can improve on, if there's anything that we can. You know, just anything you want to hear about. And yeah, that's us done, I guess.
All right,
Congrats on the first podcast, everyone.
Nice one.
all right.
Let's get some lunch.
Live long and prosper. Bye.